Minister of Energy and Electricity, Dr. Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, this morning lauded Eskom's recent performance, saying today marks the longest period of the uninterrupted power supply in 5 years. He says the power utility is performing much better, citing the improvement in energy availability factor. Let's speak to power and energy expert Professor Vally Padayachee. He's also a former executive manager at Eskom and a former senior executive at City Power here in Johannesburg. Good evening, Professor. Thank you very much for joining us on the program. So the minister lauded Eskom's performance in his final briefing today, but he was quite quick to say, in as much as they believe they are within touching distance of their goal to rid the country of load shedding, that they're still not out of the woods. Your take on the power utilities' performance of at least 271 days without load shedding?
Good evening, Mfondo, and thank you for inviting me back to your show. Glad to be back. Yes, I think just to preface my comments, the minister did an excellent presentation today. I thought he spoke like an experienced generation leader, Eskom generation leader. So yes, you're absolutely correct. He did say that the net outcome is looking quite good. But if you get to the specifics, there are some key risks in the landscape, and one of the key risks, I mean, there are a few, but one of the keys is that what I call both the transmission and the distribution grid is severely constipated. That needs to be constipated. We can have a whole discussion on that. Obviously, there's financial challenges both to Eskom and the Munics. There's the municipal arrear debt. Load reduction could be the new normal following load sort of shedding. There needs to be a new operating model for both Eskom distribution and the municipality. And importantly as well, there needs to be an harmonization by NERSA together with government on the cost reflectivity and affordability with respect to pricing. And hence, the minister said, we're not out of the woods because there are also some risks on the generation side.
Professor, you speak of the minister having spoken quite well in his presentation, sounding like a generation leader. When I was listening to him as well today, I saw how he was oscillating between current grid performance and the procurement of new generation capacity from independent power producers, and I saw that there was synergy. It reminded me of the period where you had Eskom under the public enterprises and a different minister in charge of procurement of energy, and that meant that you had at any given point two ministers that had to be mindful not to overstep and commit when speaking to the public on things that were actually outside of their purview. But today it looked as though there was some sort of synergy that has been created, and perhaps it was a good move to decide to say you're going to have the electricity portfolio and then on top of it you're going to bring the energy portfolio here. Do you believe that perhaps that has led to some of the results that we're seeing now and just that synergy?
Yes, I think that's one of the key reasons. I mean, bear in mind, we actually had three ministers. We had the DPE minister, and we had the minerals and energy at the time, resources, and of course we had Minister Ramokgopa when he was the presidency. So we had three ministers on there, but I think also there's a particular energy, and excuse the pun, that comes from Minister Ramokgopa himself, and also what helps, he's an engineer himself, and so he talks the language, and we can understand him when we talk to him. So that all helps, and I think he's a quick learner. He also is very hands-on, operational, and I think he's built a lot of respect and credibility in the market space, both from the government level and in the private sector. So that all goes well.
But now the minister also revealed, though, that the energy availability factor of Eskom's power plants has dropped from the 65.2% about 2 months ago to 57.8% at the last count. This is, of course, partly due to the maintenance, which we even saw the last time around December. They would generally just ramp up their maintenance. But there's talk that there might be a need for all of us to prepare for load shedding next year, although it might not be at the scale of 2023. Your views on just that?
Well, I think I've seen those reports in the media, and I think that was also put on the media by the financial house.
Yeah.
So I would not take it too seriously. I'm of the opinion that we are away with the rapid load shedding we had in the last 2 or 3 years. But if we get to load shedding, we'll probably get to stages 1 and 2 if we have some sudden hiccups. Why I say that is inter alia. Of course, as the Minister reflected in his presentation, there was good performance from generation, but also what I would emphasize is that we also have headroom. We have a reserve margin, which we never had for years. So we have the cushion to do that. And obviously, these new generation projects, albeit there's some risk in the marketplace. I mean, the geopolitical landscape is not good. But if all of those things kick in, it all goes well.
But when will they kick in, Professor? Pardon me for interjecting there. But when will they kick in? Because that conversation of a dilemma of the lack of infrastructure in the form of high voltage transmission lines to actually accommodate the anticipated new generation capacity is quite the problem. Even when we still had Minister Mantashe back then being in charge of the portfolio of energy, beyond just him talking about the bid windows, there was always that conversation around the infrastructure now, that you're anticipating this new generation, but you've got to get the infrastructure going.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. And the marketplace realizes that. And as I said, the grid is severely constipated. So, and inter alia, you need lots of capital to expand the grid, both on the transmission and distribution side. And maybe what we need now, and I've been saying this in the last 6 months or so, that we need new technologies that can squeeze out more electrons from the existing wires. I'm being a bit technical there. So in the short term, we need that. And then to be a bit more technical, we need what we call ancillary services. So we need battery storage and other services that could supplement and complement the constipated grid. But I'm repeating, and I said this in the beginning, that's a severe risk that we have at the moment. And we've got to pull out all stops to try and alleviate that. Otherwise, we will not get the capacity on the grid that we need. And we could run the risk of load shedding if demand increases. Also, it's important we get that done, because if we need to get to 2% growth, GDP or economic growth, 3, 4, 5%, we need electricity.
And he was saying around 75%, that at least for 2025, their projection is around 75%, so they can assist in ensuring that we get that 2% GDP growth.
Yes, and also I think importantly, even with the bid window 7 projects and so on, and I mentioned this in an earlier interview this morning, that unfortunately, lots of the key aspects on those projects, on the value chain, is beyond the control of Eskom and the project developers. And one of the main factors that we know, we're sitting with a very volatile geopolitical landscape, which could come back to bite us in terms of supply chain, etc. And we can see the whole world politics is changing. And the Middle East is quite volatile. We're going to have a new president taking over in a few weeks' time in the US, with a different energy policy, etc. So all of that we've got to keep in the radar, and it's going to be touch and go in terms of that Mfundo.
But I suppose safe to say, at least for 2024, the men and women of Eskom have acquitted themselves well. We had 271 days without load shedding. So I suppose there is a good story to tell insofar as that's concerned. Professor, thank you very much as always for your time on the show. That is Professor Vally Padayachee. He's a former executive manager at Eskom and former senior executive of City Power and now an energy expert.